Boy, we sure went from build back better to expect food shortages very quickly. Some people have joked that in just 14 months, Joe Biden has tanked the United States economy, its food supply, and is on the verge of leading us into World War III. Who could have imagined it would be so bad? Now, under Donald Trump, we had our problems, but I think things were moving in a better direction, despite the fact that Trump is a potty mouth who makes mean tweets. The economy was a roaring, war was a de-escalating, unemployment was a down. People were generally happy with their lives. I remember in 2019, I talk about it all the time, Jim Cramer, greatest numbers of our lives. Now, a pandemic came along, and I'm not going to blame Trump or Biden for the pandemic. You can certainly blame powerful interests, gain-of-function research, China, Fauci even, because of the funding for gain-of-function research or whatever you want to, whatever it is you believe. The point is, as it pertains to a global crisis that no one could really track, I'm not here to play the blame game for the president. I'm here to talk about the policies they enact and what they could actually be doing. Now, I believe that because of Joe Biden's weakness across the board, it's resulted in a problem that he can't deal with, and that is the war in Ukraine, Russia's invasion, and his inability to do anything. Last night on a Timcast IRL, in our member segment, you want to check this one out, we had the CEO, co-CEO of the Daily Wire, Jeremy Boring. We talked about nuclear weapons. And it was a refreshing conversation with me, at least, because I had someone who mostly agreed with me on the issues of nuclear weapons. Truth be told, it is refreshing when someone's talking to you and you can bounce your ideas back and forth in agreement. But I do think debates are good as well, are helpful. Whenever I talk about the prospect of nuclear war, mutually assured destruction, typically people disagree with me. Even most of you guys disagree with me. When it came to Jeremy, however, he agreed. And I thought it was a good conversation. Because my position was Russia could fire a lower yield nuclear bomb on Kiev and instantly win the war in Ukraine because the West will not retaliate for many reasons. I mean, Kiev is not, Ukraine is not a NATO country. Vladimir Putin could use a lower yield bomb like a 100 kiloton bomb. What this would do, it would send shockwaves through the West. The West would be terrified to actually engage Russia because Russia is using nukes. Russia's not nuking NATO countries, so the West might be hard-pressed to start nuclear annihilation against Russia. This is why I don't believe mutually assured destruction makes sense today. I'm sure the doctrine existed for a long time, but I'm talking about in terms of warfare today, with the invasion of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin, if he were to bomb Kiev, what would happen? Now, I honestly, I don't know for sure. I'm just saying there's a probability in my mind. What I see is it flattens the command structure of the country. It sends ripples through all the other Ukrainian cities that Vladimir Putin is going to flatten these cities to win the war, causing mass desertions. The Western Redditors who are like flocking to Ukraine to fight will abandon their post in 2 seconds if a bomb drops on Kiev. It would wipe out a city. It would kill nearly 100,000, a 100 kiloton bomb. But the point is, not that I think it would happen. I'm saying that if Putin did it, I think he would decisively win, and that's terrifying. And I wonder if the West knows that. But regardless, I don't know exactly what's going to happen with war. What we do know is that Joe Biden is instilling fear in no one, and it is partly because of his positions and his weakness that Vladimir Putin is taking these opportunities. Even Bill Maher is asking the question, saying it's good to ask, why didn't Putin invade Ukraine under Trump? Because Trump said we'd hit Moscow. Trump said, he believed me a little bit, maybe 5-10%, but that's enough. It's scary. But the idea of mutually assured destruction, or at the very least, the U.S. projecting power, it worked as a deterrent. Now Vladimir Putin is reckless. Civilians are getting bombed. Airstrikes are blowing up barracks. Cities are getting wiped out. I mean, the photos from these Ukrainian cities, Mariupol, it's horrifying, man. But how does it affect you? Biden says to expect real food shortages due to Ukraine war. Oh, you better believe it. Let me give you the simple version. We get our fertilizer from Russia. That's gone. We get a lot of it, not all of it, a lot of it. And that means right now, as farmers are getting ready to plant for the spring planting season, no fertilizer. Crop yields will be down in fall. You have time to prepare. Let all of the leftists mock you and call you a prepper. And then like the humble ant, faced with a harsh winter and preparing for the winter, The grasshopper would come a knocking on that door saying, please feed me. In the original story, the grasshopper dies a brutal and gruesome death, freezing and starving in the winter. And in the modern children's tale, the ants simply share their food with the grasshopper. You know the story, right? The grasshopper frolics about and doesn't prepare for the winter, and the ants did. And then come winter, the grasshopper is like, I'm gonna die. You can choose to be whatever you want to be in this capacity. But for me, I buy food. And as you know it, I shout out Safe and Ready Meals. Go to safeandreadymeals.com if you want to pick up your emergency food supply. Man, you know, I don't usually do a lot of shout outs for Safe and Ready Meals. I think I've done maybe like 7 or 8 this in the past year. In the past 3 months, though, I think I've done like 6 already. Or I should say in 2021, I did maybe like 6 or 7. And I've probably already done, I think, like 4 or 5 this year. And it's because crisis is escalating. Safeandreadymeals.com. 3-month emergency food supply or a 4-week emergency food supply. You can get it there. This is a sponsored spot. When you buy from Safe and Ready Meals, you do help support the show. But I'll just put it this way. This stuff lasts up to 25 years. I say it's kind of like Hamburger Helper. It's dried food. You mix it in with some water. You heat it up. It's actually pretty good. We eat it. Here's your best case scenario if you buy this. You eat food. Here's your worst case scenario if you buy this. You eat food amid hyperinflation, gas shortages, and food shortages, or maybe even the apocalypse. I don't really think the apocalypse is coming. Maybe that's optimism bias. I don't think nuclear war is coming. Maybe normalcy bias, which I often bring up. I just think that right now, if we know gas prices are skyrocketing, we know inflation is through the roof, and Biden himself is telling us food shortages are coming, there's no better time to pick up some emergency supplies. And I will say this, full disclosure, maybe I shouldn't, whatever, I'm going to say it. I bought 80 of these buckets. I have a staff of 30 people. I just put in a huge order myself, and I mean that 100% legitimate. They should be coming soon. 80 buckets, which is well, let me clarify. The 4-week supply is 2 buckets. So it's, what is that? 4 weeks. So I got 40 months. Split among 30 people, we're looking at about a week of food in the event there's something actually bad happening or we see serious food shortages. But I'll tell you why. The simplest reason, I always tell people, sometimes it rains. And if it does and you get trapped in your house and your food spoils or whatever, or the power goes out, you have some emergency food. But I'll also say this. One of the reasons I actually just bought right now is not because I think the apocalypse is coming. It's because I think inflation is coming. Food shortages and inflation means you buy a 25-year shelf life product that costs you, let's say 1 bucket's like $120. 2 buckets, I think it's like, $200 or whatever. And in 6 months, it's going to be $300-$400. But it's going to sit on your shelf for 25 years, so get it while it's cheap. Here's a story from Yahoo Finance. President Joe Biden said the world will experience food shortages as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And production increases were a subject of discussion at a group of seven meeting on Thursday. It's the G7. It's going to be real, Biden said at a news conference in Brussels. The price of the sanctions is not just imposed upon Russia. It is imposed upon a lot of countries, as well as European countries and our country as well. Oh, man, I really love this one. Because Biden was like, I never said sanctions were going to deter Russia. They never do. When, in fact, Blinken and many others said it literally was their intention to deter Russia. All they're doing is hurting everybody. Biden said at the G7 summit in Brussels earlier that he and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau both discussed increasing their nation's agricultural production to try to make up shortfalls. Biden said he's also urging all nations, including those in Europe, to drop trade restrictions that could restrict exports on food. So it says most read from, you mean read more from? Anyway, the food shortages are real, my friends. We have this story from the Wall Street Journal. Fertilizer prices surge as Ukraine war cuts supply, leaving farmers shocked. As an aside, I'd just like to mention that Joe Biden came out and said he would disseminate food shortages around the world or something. I don't know the exact quote, but everyone's like, what he really meant was that he would disseminate food around the world. And I'm like, I'm not so convinced. I actually wonder if, Joe Biden and the Democrat, not just them, but the U.S. imposing these sanctions is making the food shortages. Joe Biden is literally disseminating food shortages around the world. Although I think it's fair to say he misspoke. It's kind of scary when you don't know what the president is trying to say. At any rate, it's coming. Fertilizer prices surge as Ukraine war cuts supply, leaving farmers shocked. In his 9 years selling fertilizer to corn and rice farmers in West Africa, Malik Nyang says he has never seen such a severe supply crunch or such high prices. Yeah, I got to tell y'all a story. I bought a new car. We have a lot of work going on here, so we have multiple vehicles for multiple reasons. As many of you know, I actually have a lot of cars. We have a utility vehicle that's getting modified, the Jeep it's got a winch strap on it. That's because we need utility for clearing areas. We have guest pickup, which is our Lexus, and then I recently just bought a regular gas car because guess what? I didn't have one. Yeah, no joke. I have a Tesla, but I didn't have a regular gas car. And it was actually worrying when I saw these videos of cars lining up to charge their vehicles. Truth be told, I got the Tesla a while ago because I was concerned about gas prices. I believe that was the right move. I got the regular gas car now because I'm concerned about I'm concerned about just the versatility across the board. But let me tell you the story. Why I'm bringing this up. I went to a car dealership and I said I need something that's good on gas, just a regular gas car. I have an electric car. I'm not confident in the electric car. I think it's great because I don't need to put gas in it. You drive it to run errands, you bring it back, you plug it in. But gas still comes from fossil fuels as well. I think electricity still comes from fossil fuels. I believe those prices will be going up. When I went to the dealership, you know what they told me? I went to just a couple. The first dealership, Toyota, had one new car available. One. Not kidding. One. And I was like, and it was like 60 grand. I was like, you don't have anything like cheaper? And they're like, that's all we got. I was like, okay. Went to the next dealership and they said I think they had three. They told me they had two, I'm pretty sure. And I think, honestly, I think they had three. I could be wrong. I think they said three. So the Honda dealership had three and I ended up getting a Honda. And I was just like, how do you only have three cars on the lot? And they said chip shortage. It's been bad, the worst they've seen. This is what they have in inventory. It's crazy. They also told me that people were dumping their Teslas. They're getting rid of them. I'm like, that sounds weird because I know there's a huge demand for electric cars over gas or whatever. Ultimately, truth be told, for me and, my capabilities, I thought it was good to have electric and gas for versatility. That if for some reason electricity is unavailable, a gas car can drive far. Electric car, Tesla, it's not getting you across this country. The range on a Tesla, you can drive only so far before you got to stop at a supercharger, and we've all seen how that plays out. It's not fun. I've used them before. Between here and the Philadelphia area where our last studio was, it's like a 3-hour drive. We had to stop halfway through and go to a supercharger, and it takes 20 or 30 minutes to charge it to full. It's not bad, I guess, but it's also really bad for the battery to do that, to supercharge it. But that's what we did. And, I've known since then, it's a bad idea to rely on that for long distance travel. Now, I think it's a bad idea to rely on gas outright because of what we've seen from this administration. But I tell you this, man, when they're talking about supply crunch for food, cars, everything, everywhere across the board, the crunch is bad. Oh, man, I going to a dealership and then being like, we have one car. They had a bunch of used cars, but they still only had like 7 used cars. And I was like, wow, man, like, how do you guys work here? You sell a car to make money. That's what salesmen will do. And they didn't have any vehicles to even sell. That to me is nuts. And we're about 50 miles west of the DC area. Now, things are getting bad. When Yahoo Finance Insider Monkey runs 10 fertilizer stocks to buy today. Fertilizer market outlook. Wow. Futures for urea fertilizers have increased 32%, while diammonium phosphate futures have soared 13%. Oh, you gotta love the speculators. We know there's going to be a major crunch on fertilizer, food shortages, gas prices are through the roof. There's a chip shortage, we can't get cars. The economy seems to be imploding. Put your money somewhere that makes sense because the US dollar ain't it. I tell you this, man. I'm talking about things that you could buy to, kind of hedge your bet against the dollar. Hey, fertilizer ain't bad, I suppose, though don't take advice from me. I don't know where this is going. But maybe I'll look into buying fertilizer stock. That's crazy, man. Fertilizer. People need to eat. If there's one thing to invest in, it's food. They say one of the best investments is alcohol because when people are depressed, they drink. And when people celebrate, they drink. So, all across the board. Yeah, but that's a good investment, I guess, if society functions. If it gets to the point where there's no food, well, the person who owns the food will be king. Was it in the land of the starving, the man with a loaf of bread is king? At least for a little while before the starving people beat him and steal his bread from him. But that's where we seem to be going. A lot of people joke, they're like, man, when the apocalypse happens, I'm coming to your place, Tim. I'm like, no, don't count on it. We're not keeping all of our important food stores here. We have a secure location, no joke, because we want to make sure we can keep doing the show in the event of a major disaster. I'm not saying I'm predicting a major disaster or anything like that. And truth be told, I am not prepping as any reasonable prepper would. You know, preppers actually prepare for their own survival. And what I have is like bins of emergency food, you know, stored. That's about it. When I say we have a secure location, it's just that I own some property in central West Virginia or something, you know. The idea being get out to the country, good investment to have land, and in the event of a real catastrophe, we can do the show from the middle of nowhere. No joke, we legit can. We've got this. We've got a contingency plan set up. Again, not that I think it would happen, but if you have the means and the capability, why aren't you preparing for the worst? Truth be told, the average person cannot do what the wealthy can. Rich people are building bunkers in Wyoming. They've been building bunkers in New Zealand, preparing for something really, really bad. And a lot of people are terrified about nuclear war. I take a look at what the rich are doing, and I have to wonder if they know something I don't. The ultra wealthy. Okay, I know, I get it. I'm rich, but I'm not like a billionaire or anything like that, right? Certainly, the powerful elites know something we all don't. And I'm like, maybe I should have property in Wyoming like the rest of these people, but dude, Wyoming's out of my price range. It's super expensive up there, and it's getting more and more expensive, surprisingly. I suppose there are properties you can find in Wyoming and Montana, but I mean, in areas where there's going to be infrastructure, the prices are going nuts. Who's buying up these properties? People with helicopters, I guess, who are planning on landing at their private airstrip to survive something crazy. But the reality is, maybe nothing crazy will happen. I think what may be happening is that these wealthy individuals, they have money. And they're like, well, if I have the money, why not create a contingency plan? For me, I mentioned I bought 40 month supplies, 80 buckets, and it's expensive. It's like, I think it was like 10 grand or something. But this is the expectation of food shortages and prices skyrocketing. We are going to have hamburger helper. That's the way I describe it. You know, it's like a bag of noodles and you put it in water and you heat it up and it's good in like 15, 20 minutes. So we have a bunch of that and we're going to eat it. Our worst case scenario in terms of investment is like nothing bad happens, but we just eat food. And the best case scenario is that in terms of our investment is that we were right. Truth be told, the best case scenario is nothing bad happens and we just eat the food. And the worst case scenario is something really bad happens and we have to eat it. But, you know, for the average person, I would just say, do what you can to take care of yourself, because we've certainly seen the mass rioting. We've got the political turmoil internally. We've got international conflict, fears of Thucydides' trap. Joe Biden came out. Check this. This is what you should be listening to, because we talked about it a bit with the New World Order thing. Joe Biden comes out and said, you know, as I was told in a secure meeting by a military official, every 3 to 4 generations, there's like a change. And from 1900 to 1946, 60 million people died. And then we created the liberal world order, and soon there's going to be a new world order, and we got to lead it. Think about what he said for a few moments. He said every 3 to 4 generations. Okay, from 1900 to 1946, 60 million people died. Yo, it sounds like Joe Biden saying a lot of people are going to die. That's kind of crazy, right? If he's likening what happened then to something happening now, he's basically saying people are going to die. But I don't know, man. Part of me doesn't want to be paranoid and conspiratorial, so the truth is, it's easy for me to buy emergency supplies and to have land. It is. For the average person, not so much. If you are like a regular middle-class working person and you're prepping with like 30 years worth of beans in your basement, someone might say that's a bit unreasonable because you're investing so heavily in something that probably won't happen. If you're rich and you're like, I got to spend money on something, and then you buy a landing strip in Wyoming, I mean, they might call you a prepper or whatever. They might get scared and be like, what are the rich doing? Or it might just be like, bro, if I'm a billionaire, I'm going to just have stuff. You know, it's not even a thought to build a bunker in New Zealand if you're a billionaire. I wonder what Elon Musk's planned for. You know, does he have any kind of, he's probably building a rocket ship to go into space to avoid whatever's supposed to be coming. I don't know. Let me just add to the fears of the food shortages and to the issue at hand. A food crisis will make people ravenous. I'll tell you, man, right now, people aren't hungry. People are overfed. Yeah, no, it's true. The people want to talk about, feeding the hungry or whatever. It's like, yo, America has fat homeless people. They don't have houses, but they got enough food. We got a lot of food. What happens when we don't? What happens when race riots turn into food riots? People will kick your door in because they're hungry. Yeah, so some people have been like, don't tell people you're buying this stuff. I'm like, dude, ain't nobody coming to my house. As of right now, let me just say, it would be a very, very bad idea considering the swattings. Yeah, don't come here. Considering the swattings and we had the bomb squad show up, rest assured there are top men lurking in the shadows at this point. And I'll just leave it at that. You know, I shouldn't say too much, but yeah, ain't nobody coming here. I suppose in the event of a true apocalypse, though, we've got a secure location. So I don't know what to expect. I really don't. Food shortages could just mean that we're going to slim down and people are going to lose weight, maybe. I'm not convinced we're going to starve. We have a lot of food. But who knows? It may just be that the poorest people don't have access. And if they don't, they're not going to roll over and die. They're going to say, I want food. So we may see something different. It may not be that people are roaming through the streets smashing windows. It may be that the government has to do food drives like they did during COVID. You remember that when miles-long lines of vehicles were waiting at checkpoints to get food because they didn't have any? I'm telling you, man, the people who had emergency supplies when that went down didn't have to worry about empty store shelves. They just cracked open their box and said, you know, we need some of this. But you should never open your emergency food. Never. No, seriously. The idea is if something truly bad happened to where food supplies were constrained, you need to go and source food first and only open when you're starving. That's what they say. Get better advice from survivalists than me. But what you would do is you'd leave your buckets alone and you'd look for berries. You'd plant a garden. You had to time your garden properly. I'll also warn you too, man. People think it's simple. You do not understand. We had a garden. We planted a bunch of tomatoes. Then one day we had like 80 tomatoes and we're like, what do we do with all this? They're going to go bad. Because you're supposed to plant one week at a time. So every week you get the tomatoes ripen and are fresh to eat once per week to store them. Otherwise they all happen at once. And what do? Sell them? Now, if you're trying to supply yourself with food, you have to know how to farm. And farming is not as simple as I plant a seed and food happens. Maybe for one person for a short amount of time. You also got to learn how to make preserves. We have a wineberry season up here in the mountains. It's amazing. I love it. Where you go in your backyard and there's just wild Chinese raspberry everywhere. You could walk outside and in 10 minutes you have a bowl full of them. And they're delicious. You can just eat them right off the vine. Or a branch or whatever it is. It's amazing. But they don't last that long. But you can make preserves. You can boil it down, put a little lemon juice in it. People put sugar in it, but I don't care for that. A little lemon juice is good enough. And then you put it in a jar and you preserve it. It lasts on the shelf, I think, after that 3 months. Or you can put it in a refrigerator or freezer and it can last for up to years. You got to understand how to prepare for the winter if you're living in a winter climate. I don't think we're going to get to that point, truth be told. I don't think we will come to a point in the next couple of years where you're going to crack open your emergency food bin. However, what I think is irrelevant to what you should be prepared for. Joe Biden says it's coming. It may have no impact on us. We're wealthy Americans. And I mean like even the poorest Americans, like to the rest of the world. So we may just still end up fat and happy. But just figure out for yourselves what you think is important and what you want to do. And do your own research. Talk to some experts. Decide for you how to respond to this. Decide for yourself. Because I don't want to tell people to go and buy a bunch of stuff. And then they're just like, you know, I needed gas for my car instead or something. You have to understand what makes sense for you. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.